All right, hello everybody. We are back for our latest episode of Boardroom RevOps, where we're bringing you valuable tips from RevOps experts so you can make it to the C-suite. I'm James, co-founder of AccountAim, the RevOps BI platform. Really excited to welcome Matt Lauer to Boardroom RevOps today. He's the director of RevOps at Consensus. Matt, great to have you on.
Happy to be here, James. Happy to
Matt,
talk about RevOps. That's what we do.
For sure. Matt is one of the most analytically savvy RevOps operators that I've had the good fortune of meeting. So much so that we had to have him on as an advisor to AccountAim, actually. So I'm extra excited to have Matt on and share his awesome insights that have been so helpful for us. But we're going to talk about something a little bit adjacent to analytics today, although I'm sure that'll make an appearance too. And that's how to take a RevOps function from either nascent or struggling to best in class. So we'll dive right into that. Before we do, Matt, do you want to just share your background in a bit more detail?
Yeah, I have the very typical place to start for all RevOps people, which is in politics in Washington, D.C., doing nonprofit work. I feel like all RevOps people have a weird background. Mine, I almost feel like, is one of the weirdest. But essentially, I started off doing this political stuff, and they had a CRM, and I started figuring out the CRM because I was basically a glorified SDR. And then I suddenly really like doing it, and then they're like, you should be in charge of the CRM, and then they're like, you should be in charge of the recruitment program and all the function around it. And I'm an idiot 23-year-old, I don't know what I'm doing, so to learn it all on the fly, end up being really successful for it, get promoted out of doing that into doing actual politics. I'm like, I don't like this, I don't want to do that anymore. So I had to figure out what I did in this nonprofit land, and thankfully I got an MBA and found the right job description, which ended up being a marketing ops position, thankfully a healthcare tech company in the middle of COVID. So really good job positioning there. But since that point, I've been at different organizations doing marketing operations within, kind of like a RevOps role. And then most importantly at Consensus, I started as the marketing ops person. And since then, I am now the director of RevOps at Consensus. And so it's been a journey to go from the marketing ops position that was relatively siloed into something much bigger, which is running the whole RevOps department for the growing company that is Consensus.
That's great. And, it's funny, pretty much everyone does have kind of a unique background in RevOps, and that includes all the folks on the show. But you're actually the second person from politics on Boardroom RevOps, so you guys are quickly becoming one of the larger contingents, actually. He was a lobbyist, though. I'm not sure if you were lobbying.
No, I mean, I did a lot of membership stuff, but our C4 definitely did do a lot of, I don't know if it was technically lobbying, but all the legal distinctions. They were on Capitol Hill doing stuff. I dealt with the people out in the field.
Well, let's get into it then. So you experience what I think is a really common phenomenon when joining a company, and I hear it a lot, especially in RevOps. So, I joined this company, and RevOps is either nascent, maybe I'm the first RevOps person, or it's turned over a bunch, or it's just struggling. People don't really even know how to think about RevOps. It's siloed. So many possible issues. Maybe shed some background on kind of like the state of the world when you joined the company.
Yeah, when I started at Consensus, they were growing company. We were in a good ARR place, good and growing, but I was, I think, the third marketing ops person in the last year. So there had been quite a bit of internal changeover, and we didn't have a CS ops person. There was a sales ops person, but there was no RevOps function. Everything was still an ops person siloed in their various departments. And I think that's kind of the traditional way that people think about ops and CS ops. I mean, CS ops is relatively new. Marketing ops, it's not as new, and sales ops has been around for a while. But when we came in, I came in as the marketing ops person. We then had a change in the sales ops person, and then we got a CS ops person within the same year. And what I found is that I came in, I started doing marketing ops. There was a lot of, tree rings of history from prior marketing ops people, right? So you had to understand the landscape, figure out what the problems were. And I usually try and be aggressive within the first 3 to 6 months of joining a company and asking a lot of questions, figuring out what needs to be done, and then just executing on it as quickly as possible without being careless or anything like that. And I think it worked out pretty well, because when we were going to hire our new sales ops person, the VP of sales, Dan, who I love Dan, he was like, I want to bring Matt in to help interview for the sales ops person. So he's like, I don't know what I'm looking for. And in hindsight, that's, I think, something people don't realize, is that when you're a VP of sales, a VP of CS, you don't know what you're looking for, because the ops person isn't just doing CS. They're not doing sales, they're doing the operations part. And the operations part is a completely different language. And so he brought me in to help do the interview. And we hired an amazing person. He's still here, but we hired an amazing person who's doing all of this. And I remember he was looking back and he's like, I'm really glad I brought Matt in, because he was asking all the questions I didn't know to ask. And in particular, my favorite question I ask, and this really cuts through to see if someone knows their stuff, is what's your favorite Excel formula that's not VLOOKUP?
It's index match.
Usually, you see, this is why James is a good one, because he had the right answer. It's index match. In fact, ask that question of an LLM while you were listening to this, because I found all three of the LLMs I tried had radically different answers. And, I think it was Gemini said VLOOKUP, so Gemini's clearly
It's out.
Not good,
Yeah.
right? All that to say is I was being brought in. I was helping to, hire the people. I did that for a CSOps person as well. And after a little while too, it was, I think, nearing the end of the year, and I just went to our CRO and was like, we're constantly meeting. Us ops people, us enablement people, we're constantly meeting, yet the people who we are taking orders from, they don't have the full picture. And so this was creating a lot of friction, so to speak, between it, because everyone was siloed in their orders, but we were having to get intel from outside of the silo. And so you had this weird reporting structure that was vertical but needed to be horizontal. And so that's where the friction was coming in. And so from that point on, I was advocating for RevOps. But that's really the landscape I came into, is there was a lot of there wasn't a lot of organization around it. Everything was siloed, and more importantly is that people didn't know what they were looking for in ops. They just knew what they had right now wasn't working.
Yeah,
they didn't know how to prescriptively get to a solution.
I honestly think that is the biggest challenge to most RevOps things, is that there's still not a great definition, or at least a great understanding of what RevOps is across, maybe even within RevOps, but certainly across the broader executive leadership of many companies.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you started to give, you kind of talked about what you stepped into and the challenges. You also started to give some of the solutioning or evolution that you kind of led to get RevOps into a better spot. And so maybe double clicking into each of those really quickly, and then we'll get into kind of more post that point. But you made a comment that really important to kind of dive in, get a lot of things done, build trust in the beginning when you step into a situation like this. So I think there are some potholes in that as well. But how did you approach that? Any advice you'd give to someone in that situation?
So a few things. First is, when you first join a company, you have what I call the no stupid question card. In the first 60 to 90 days, you can ask a lot of questions, and people can't really blame you because you're new. You're trying to figure things out. You're trying to understand how the world works. And so I really advocate for people to be aggressive in using that card. And it's not, but I think what's important is, don't use that card to be a jerk, be a know-it-all. Of course, why are you doing it this way? No. Truly go into it okay, so I see this is how we're running MQLs and how we're processing MQLs and how we're sending it to the SDRs. Why are we doing this particular thing? Why are we doing this particular thing? Why are we doing this particular thing? And the answer tells you a lot, even just the classification of the answer. Because if they say, it's done for this reason because the SDRs like it this way, et cetera, et cetera. If there's a deep reason to it, it's like finding a fence in the middle of a field. It's well, let's assume that the fence is there for a good reason. Now we have the justification for it. Okay, that's great. But if they immediately say, I don't know, that's how we've always done it, that's your giveaway that someone's probably not thought about this in a while, or at least pervasively. And then obviously if people say it's this horrible process and we hate how it's done, I constantly get bad leads, well then they're leading you to where the problem is. But don't just take it at face value. You need to challenge it, because sometimes there's friction between departments, especially anytime something transitions from one silo to another. Marketing to SDRs, SDRs to sales, sales to CS, CS back to sales. You need to make sure that it's not just biases coming in. So it's important to ask questions on both sides of the aisle, and importantly, try not to give away what the other side says to poison the well or anything like that. Just be a listener. Take lots of notes. It's really easy to take notes now with recording stuff and AI being able to take care of those transcripts. So take in that information, ask lots of questions, figure out is there a reason for it? Is there not a reason for it? Is there a bad reason for it? But don't just start giving out your recommendations. And you can propose ideas, and I would also advocate, if you are going to propose ideas when you're doing this listening session, couch it as there are ways that we can do it. Here's an example. Don't start prescribing within those first 30 to 60 days unless truly there's a life-threatening problem within the business that needs to be immediately fixed, right? Because once you're done with those first 60 or 90 days of intaking things, writing down, listening, and figuring out questions, the second part that you need to do is start mapping it out in a flow chart. Is my preference, because you need to build something that you can interact with to understand how the process works, but more importantly, that you can show someone else that they can interact with it. And if you have a flow chart and you make it relatively simple and you don't make it chaotic and lots of different moving parts, but just a very simple like lead comes in, here's the different ways that you can route a lead based on where they came from, etc. And you build something like that out, then you can essentially build the flow in a way that you can share it. And then it's a lot easier to implement because you've already done the scoping, you've already done the intake, you've already built out a structure that anyone can speak. It's not a series of HubSpot workflows that no one understands but you. And then you can get buy-in. And the thing is that if you've done all of that, that's 80 to 90% of the work. The actual building of it now in CRMs is very fast. So most of my time is not spent building things in a CRM. It's spent asking questions, getting data, building out flowcharts, presenting it to stakeholders, getting feedback, incorporating it, and then launching it. And so that's why within the first 6 months I was able to do so much, is because you go slow and diligently so that then you can go really fast. So by the end of 6 months, we've done new lead scoring, revamped the lead sourcing, revamped the funnel, revamped reporting, and it's a lot of stuff that was done, but because it was planned out so much, it was comprehensive in nature too. You weren't just playing whack-a-mole with problems and creating more and more problems. So it's important also to set expectations about that. I told people, like, nothing's going to be fixed in the first 60 or 90 days unless it's a fire drill, but trust me, it's going to work out. And it's not a trust me bro thing, it's like a true trust me, this is going to be a good thing that we do.
Yeah, that's great. Super good example of how to come in and build trust and do it the right way too. So that's kind of like step one, at least in your experience. And then step two, you talked about like the team expanding, and I'll call it RevOps, even though it wasn't branded as RevOps yet. You gave a good specific example on, technical aptitude of someone that's like been in Excel and done analytics and things like that. But more broadly, what are you looking for when expanding the RevOps team? Are you some people are like they lean towards experience, some people lean towards like slope. Can this person learn? You might have a different mental model.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think about it?
You always have to ask the question of seniority, right? Because if you're looking for someone who's more senior that can come in and has a lot of that background, it's different than someone where maybe you have a more limited budget and you have to not get someone with so much experience, but you don't want to hire someone that doesn't know what to do in the job. So the first part is you got to classify the two types of people that you can. It's a spectrum, obviously, but those are like the two ends of the spectrum. But regardless, a lot of experience doesn't mean that they're going to be a good fit and able to solve your problems. Same with very little experience doesn't mean that they're not a good ops person, because someone had to take a chance on me when I was this idiot coming from nonprofit political space, right? I didn't have an ops background, even though I did. It's just nonprofit titles are all made up and meaningless. So you have to take a chance on it. So I think what's more helpful to point out, especially if you're in a hiring position or you're trying to break into operations, is you need to be able to exhibit what I think is an ops brain. And that's how I describe it. And basically what an ops brain is, if you're a person, it doesn't even matter where you are. You could be an SDR, a salesperson, a lobbyist, an idiot nonprofit like me. And if you have that ops brain and you show that aptitude, people are going to take notice. And what you can look for that is, number one, when they have a problem they're experiencing, like a process problem or an inefficiency, are they trying to figure out how to make it better for themselves without having to ask for help? Like, I know when I was doing my nonprofit stuff and I was logging contact reports, I was like, this is really slow. And then I found a different view in Sugar CRM. This dates me. Sugar CRM, I found a different place to do it. I was like, oh, I could do this in mass. Oh, I could do a workflow to make it easier. Oh, I can make this funnel better. Like, if you have this proactivity about figuring things out, that's a really good indicator of an ops brain. The second part is looking for someone who's excited because of that. If they're like, ugh, my CRM's being an idiot again, it's not working, like, that's not what we're looking for. You're looking for someone who's like, yeah, and then I, started playing around with this workflow and I figured out I could do this cool other thing, and then I did this, and they're almost like bragging and excited to share with you the technical details of what they did. That is a really good thing that you're going to be looking for, is someone who's excited by it. And then the third part too, and this is true for everything, but also true of ops hires, is you want to look for someone who's hungry to do more. And that actually biases towards people with less experience. And if you're looking at someone who is, maybe a CSM, and then they kind of go into like a CSM specialist ops type role, and they're looking to break into an official ops title or something like that, that's the kind of indicator you're looking at, that not only are they hungry, which means they're trying to learn and better themselves, but they also want to get into this sphere, even if they don't have it on their job description. So those are kind of the three core things we look at. Yes, there's all the technical stuff, but again, you don't have to be like a Python coding wizard expert person. You really want to see someone who, when presented with a problem, is going to try and figure it out on their own first, instead of just complaining or asking for help or just giving up.
Yeah, I love that. So it sounds like you lean pretty intangible, which I think makes sense. Like a lot of the systems and metrics can be learned, but you got to have that like way of thinking and that excitement about the job, which I totally agree with.
Like, I had a real quick thing there. Every single company I've been at has had a different tech stack combination. Every single one. I had Sugar and Marketo, and then I had Pardot and Salesforce, never again. And then I had HubSpot and Salesforce, and then I had Marketo and Salesforce, and now we're an all HubSpot shop. The tool doesn't matter as much. What matters is if you have the brain for it and you can figure it out, because no company ever has the same tech stack. Maybe they'll have the same CRM, but everyone has a different thing. They have SalesLoft, Gong, Engage. They have, just any combination. You just need someone who can figure it out, who can figure it out quickly, and who wants to figure it out, isn't intimidated by having to.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. So you now have expanded the team in the situation, but you're still feeling friction, as you mentioned, from not everyone knowing kind of what's happening at once, people working in silos. And so you essentially, I'm not going to call it rebranded, reorganized to RevOps broadly. Before we talk about like how you did this, I'd love to hear you elaborate on like why that was important to go from siloed functions to RevOps as a whole.
Yeah. The VPs at Consensus, sales, CS, they all work with each other really well. I'm constantly on them with calls. They constantly are sharing information. So this was not born out of VPs that never get along, even though we know that's true in a lot of organizations. But what I still was seeing is that despite the fact that they were able to communicate, they worked well and collaboratively together, there were blind spots. Like, you would have the CS ops person being assigned a certain job and role and doing stuff, and we would only learn when we actually all met together what they were doing, and then we would have someone like Jacob, our sales ops person, be like, but we already have this, or we already did it, or it already exists and we can just tweak it, and our CS ops person's like, okay, I guess that already exists. And so it was clear to me that just because you have a good working relationship across the VPs doesn't mean that your ops people are going to work well together. And again, this goes back to the fact that your VPs don't know ops. Most of them don't know ops. Most of them came up as salespeople or CSMs, or they came up as marketers. They're not ops people. Ops people in those roles are not very common. Now, you can have some that are more ops-minded, some that are very not ops-minded. In fact, a lot of them tend not to be ops-minded. So they don't know what they don't know, or they don't know what to share. They don't know where to coordinate. And so because we were all in our silos, the only way we could get stuff done and not pull our hair out is by talking a lot and trying to coordinate our projects. But the problem was that I was trying to coordinate our projects, and I didn't have the authority to. I didn't have the authority to tell the CS ops person, like, we shouldn't be focusing on this because you don't even have the foundation to do what you're trying to do well. Like, we got to get to the foundation. And so then we have this situation where the CS ops person has to go to their boss to convince them to delay the thing they care about because something they don't understand needs to be done first. And so there's just this mismatch of expertise and ownership and pressure. And so the idea is that if you take the primary responsibility out of the silo and instead make that a dotted line stakeholder, and then you put someone that has the ability to understand all of the silos, but also understands overarching ops responsibilities, and that person reports up to a CRO, for example, so he has the final say and he has the authority to be like, listen, I know that this is important for you guys, CS, but we have to focus on this for sales because my director is telling me this is important, he's made the case. That helped alleviate some of the pressure of these mismanagements and frictions. And so once we switched over to that, we had built up a lot of trust too. That's very important. We built up a lot of trust with these VPs so that when we said, trust us, this is going to make things easier and you're actually going to get more of what you want, and it will allow you to speak more in English rather than trying to get technical with us. You say, I have this problem, and now all of a sudden it's not just me, but it's also the ops people that can think strategically. And so there's a lot of things this enabled beyond just the ops side. It was also strategic focus. It was making sure everyone is aligned. So there's a lot of things to say there, but it's just all those frictions. And I noticed those frictions when we had good VPs on good terms with each other. And just think about a situation where that's not true.
Yeah,
it's gonna be that
totally.
much harder.
I think you covered two of my follow-ups. I just want to clarify and put a bow on it to be sure. The benefits of doing this really, one, kind of like visibility, make sure we understand what everyone is doing. Two, authority, make sure that we can actually prioritize things correctly so we have the right foundation so we're not duplicating work. And then three, I'll call it like ease of working. It's actually easier for the VPs to communicate what they need into one spot. They don't have to be quite as technical. Is that a good summary of like the benefits of shifting to RevOps?
I think that's a pretty good explanation of it. And I think the one that people don't think about nearly as much is the failure to align expertise with authority making. Like it's really something that you don't think about until you're in a situation where they're over prescribing a solution when they don't even know what's available there. The classic one is your CRO coming to you and be like, oh, if we could just have a checkbox that told me that they attended this event. And like every ops person would roll their eyes and be like, no, you don't want a checkbox for an attendance of an event. That's not right. You want to have like an event object or a participation or a campaign. But if you are responsible for the ops person and your vertical, you're going to feel pressure to prescribe, and it's going to also just put a really awkward situation for someone that's typically a manager, not even like a director. Like it's a VP and a manager, and so there's a big title gradient difference. And unless you're a very forward person, you're probably not going to be willing to say, no, that checkbox is a stupid idea. We should do something different.
Yeah, definitely. Tell me how you kind of executed post that shift then. I think like you might be too humble to say it, but I know that some of the investors in Consensus said that Consensus had the best run RevOps function in their entire portfolio, which is pretty high praise from a class of person investors that aren't always quick to praise necessarily. And so like tell me more, how are you running the team? There's so much to uncover here, but how do you think about running like a good RevOps function generally?
Yeah. And there's a lot to learn. Like we're redoing kind of our sprint planning process right now. They're putting more meat on the bones. I think we were a little too light on it before. So all this to say is we have not fully figured it out. There's still a lot that we need to do, a lot that we need to clarify. But in general, the principles of what you look for is you have your team, you're very close with all of your ops people. You're meeting, I meet with probably my ops people every single day. So you have a very clear back and forth communication with them. The second is just being very transparent with them, right? So if there's a priority at the leadership level, if there's a high priority, you want to share that with them so they can understand the full scope. Because they need to understand the full scope. They need to understand strategy. So even though they may not be in the higher level strategic making meetings, they need to be fully read in on like, well, this is the direction we're going. We do that at the company level as well, but you also want to have that come from your ops person so that they can filter it into how you're actually going to execute on this and what this means from a practical perspective. Because if someone says, we're going to be focusing on expansion more this year, for instance, well, coming from an executive, that's one thing. Coming from your director of RevOps, who's going to be able to double click on the implications of that, we can talk about it, we can figure out what does that mean for our internal priorities, that's a completely different ballgame. So it's all about that back and forth to make sure we're all on the same page. The other thing, too, is making sure that you empower each of your specific ops people, like sales ops, marketing ops, CS ops, really empowering them to fully understand and own that vertical. And they don't have to be the full strategic decision maker, but they should feel really comfortable with being able to do some strategic type work and be able to talk with that person and be that trusted confidant in it. So anything I can do to help build that trust between them and the confidence between them so that they can go to their VP and be able to talk about what needs to be done and feel confident that they're recommending the right thing. And then just in terms of other practical items, you're going to want to constantly have check-in meetings with those stakeholders. And it's not just your sales ops person talking to the stakeholder. You, or me in this case, talks with that stakeholder on a semi-recurring basis so that there's nothing that's being missed. And you also do some cross-functional meeting. You partner with people like in finance. It's just, unfortunately, there's a lot of meetings that are involved in here. I think more things can be done asynchronously. I think I over-indexed on meetings. But especially if you're remote, don't skimp on talking with people. Don't skimp on check-ins. Don't skimp on getting feedback. You just launched something. Like, tell me your honest opinion. What's going on here? Like, you really want to index on talking a lot with people, because if you're a RevOps person and you're constantly head down and you're just taking stuff from an intake form and you're never talking outside of the intake form, that is going to be a failure. And if you want a way to not progress vertically in the company, that is a guaranteed way to do it. Like, even definitely. If you think you're just doing basic executions, if you think you're like a specialist or whatnot, it doesn't hurt to just reach out and talk to the people that are the end users, and you can build some rapport there. And I think this is where the politics part is coming in me. But you got to build rapport with these people. You got to understand where they're coming from. You got to get yourself out there so that when people think of RevOps, when they think of the product of RevOps, they're thinking about you. And if things aren't going well because your org's in more of a dumpster fire state than not, this is the best way to protect yourself too, because you're like, listen, I agree. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed. Help me understand what's going on. Help me understand if this is a good solution. And that's going to do a lot for putting you in the right light when you're talking to a frontline worker, or you're talking to a middle manager, or if you're talking with a VP.
Yeah, that's great. Tell me, just to round it out, we're nearly at time here, sadly. I think a lot of that was an excellent description of team management, stakeholder management. You're also incredibly savvy, as I mentioned, on like the data side, the system side, the technical side of things. Walk me through kind of your quick checklist or your mental model around, I think you might describe to just like data process systems is like the general way you think about like foundation. I might be misremembering that. Like, how do you think about the structural stuff?
You're misremembering. You remembered correctly, so you misremembered. You're misremembering. So yeah, it's data process and systems. I typically put it in that order on purpose. So you need to have a good foundation for data and a good foundation for processes that feed that data. And then once you have a good foundation for both of those, your systems can be in a good place. And in other words, the other reason I put it in that order is because if you think a system's going to fix your data problems, you're almost always wrong.
Can't throw a tool at it. Yeah,
because
you gotta get the data right.
Theoretically, you could run a business, and I know every ops person is going to throw a banana at their screen, could run off an Excel sheet. Because what is a CRM except for a giant Excel sheet with a lot of tabs that has a nice user interface?
Yep.
It's kind of just that, right? So you really need to master your data. You need to master your processes. You need to go slow so that you can eventually go quick. And the reason why I think we've been so successful here is because for 18 months, we did very little else than master the data and process within our system. That's what we exclusively focused on. And so once we were done with that, once we had really good understanding of how the marketing data was flowing, we had a really good understanding of our pipeline, we had a really good understanding of our customers and the health of them, and we were able to measure and map all the levels and the trends and the rates of this, well, now you can do the cool stuff. Now you can start layering in clay and being like, well, now I want to analyze all the transcripts for churn risks and what's mentioned and then put it into a report and see what the most likely version is and what the most likely reason. And I can do that in 15 minutes because I know all of our customer data is accurate.
Yep.
That's what it means to go slow, to go quick. That's all, that's how I think about it, getting those foundations down. And that doesn't mean once the foundations are down, you stop. This is something else that I think about too, which is if you have an idea for a piece of data and you know the data is important, but you don't yet have a use for it, if it doesn't cost you much, just start making it. So a good example of it is we have our user data, and for the longest time I'm like, I know this is going to be important, but I don't know how to use it yet. So I worked with one of our BI people, Kyle is his name, I wish I could steal him onto the RevOps team. I can only steal a little bit of his time for the RevOps team. But we basically took a lot of our customer data, I understood it, and then we constructed different things like an active user rate, a consumption number of the number of licenses we have, the kind of activities they did. And we bell curved the kind of activities a certain persona does and then mapped it across all of our users. And I'm just collecting this data. And then we fed it into HubSpot and we fed it in on a consistent basis so we could have a time series. And I'm only now starting to figure out how to use this stuff. But we started feeding it in 18 months ago. And so now I have 18 months of this data. And I can start using it, and I can start building things like, what percentage of our user base is in the top 15%, because that seems to correlate really well with their active user rate, which also correlates with if they're going to renew or not, or if they're going to expand. And so the other thing just to speak to people is, as you're building out your data processing systems, if you've got an opportunity to start recording things, even if you're not sure what you're going to use it for, data's cheap, so do it. You never know.
We say that all the time too. Just start snapshotting everything. The more you can snapshot and trend, you're going to want it later for sure.
Because you will kick yourself endlessly when 12 months down the line you're like, I wish I had 12 months of this data. Because how am I supposed to measure churn if I don't know where we're starting from until now? So, and that's the other reason why you want to get your data and process in a good place, is because for whatever lagging indicator you care about, which churn tends to be the biggest lagging indicator, right? Because if they're churning because of onboarding and they signed a 3-year contract,
12 months or 36.
What are you how are you gonna study that, right? You can only guess and check, or you can't even check, guess really. So get your data process and your systems in order now so that you can start getting that data, and then you can build the exciting stuff on top of it. And also it makes your life easier.
Yeah, 100%.
Typically
Do it
ops
once.
is like a 3-legged stool where you've got fire drills, tactical, and strategic. And a lot of people talk about RevOps being burnt out because of the fire drills. But the thing is that if you do the tactical and strategic to stop the fire drills, well, now you have an unbalanced stool because the fire drills are small, the other two are really big. But you get the point, right? You're now investing in preventing fire drills by having a good structure, and then that means you can invest more in doing more strategic, more tactical. So essentially, your flywheel gets going faster and faster and faster because you're spending less of your time fixing up your screw-ups or fixing up the screw-ups of the system that hasn't been optimized.
Yeah, definitely. Matt, sadly we're out of time. I suspect we might need to have you on again next year to talk more about data, because I feel like we could have spoken another 30 minutes about that. But thank you so much for joining. This is awesome. We'll chat again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, happy to talk, James, and happy to talk data anytime.